So uh, I want you to imagine, like, you're running on a treadmill,
Right.
and you are just sweating. Your legs are incredibly heavy. You're, completely exhausted.
You're just totally drained.
Exactly. And you're staring at this tiny little screen right in front of you. And that screen tells you exactly how many steps you need to take today just to, well, basically just to earn your dinner or to keep a roof over your head.
Right.
And maybe, just maybe, if you run fast enough, you can buy yourself like a single hour of free time.
Yeah, which is, that's the modern economy in a nutshell.
It is. That treadmill is the modern economy.
Yeah.
And for our entire lives, practically every institution, every school, every career counselor, they've all told us the exact same thing.
That the only way to succeed is just to run faster.
Right. Run faster.
Ugh.
Grind harder. But what if someone didn't just upgrade the treadmill? What if they literally unplugged it completely, kicked open the front door, and told you that you don't actually have to run just to survive anymore?
Which is, quite a thought.
It's massive. And welcome to the deep dive. You are here because your time is valuable, you want to cut through the noise, and you're looking for those real aha moments that just fundamentally change how you interact with the world around you.
Yeah, and the premise we're looking at today, it definitely demands a complete mental reset.
Oh, absolutely. So
Yeah.
we're digging into a highly strategic document. This was prepared in June 2026, and it's titled Automation, Artificial Scarcity, and the Future of Human Value.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission of this deep dive today is to explore a truly radical, almost uncomfortable premise. Because when we usually hear about automation or, AI, the headlines are almost universally screaming the same thing, right?
Right, yeah, robots are taking our jobs.
Exactly. Robots taking our jobs. It's this constant, suffocating drumbeat of panic. But the source material we have today argues that this is entirely the wrong lens.
Yeah, completely the wrong lens.
The real story isn't about losing jobs. It's about automation, actually destroying what the author calls artificial scarcity and completely redefining what it means to be a human being.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, let's unpack this for a second because I want to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
We're so trained to panic about job displacement. Is focusing on jobs actually missing the forest for the trees?
Well, the document argues forcefully that, yes, it really is. Focusing on jobs is kind of like focusing on the sweat instead of the treadmill you mentioned earlier.
Oh, wow.
Right. The core thesis here is far more profound than just, like, workplace efficiency. The true disruption isn't that a machine can send emails faster than you can, or, that an algorithm can balance a ledger.
Right.
The disruption is that automation fundamentally changes the entire mechanism of access. If you look closely at, well, really the last few centuries, practically all of our life essentials, the food we eat, the homes we live in, the healthcare we receive,
Basically everything we need to survive.
everything. It's all been filtered through human labor scarcity. These things have been gatekept by money and institutional permission.
In other words, you have to earn the right to exist by, performing labor for someone else.
Exactly. That is the fundamental foundation of our current social contract. Your survival depends on performing labor in a very scarce system.
Right.
But consider the alternative. If the production of those survival essentials becomes easier, faster, hyper-local, and, completely divorced from human exhaustion,
What happens?
well, then that entire old narrative of scarcity just loses its authority. The document actually summarizes this transition with this really brilliant observation. It states, and I'll quote it exactly, "Inflation changes the price of the key. Automation questions why the door is locked."
Oh, wow. Automation questions why the door is locked.
That's a brilliant way to frame it.
It really is.
Because it shifts the whole conversation from, like, how do we find the money to pay for things to why are these things artificially expensive in the first place?
But I know what you're thinking as you listen to this, right? You're probably sitting in your car or maybe at your desk thinking, okay, this sounds like a really great premise for a sci-fi novel. But is the door actually unlocking in the real world?
Right. Show me the proof.
Exactly. So let's ground this in reality. Because the document doesn't just, philosophize, it actually brings the receipts.
It does. There's a whole section dedicated to what the author calls grounded signals, and it brings in these concrete data points from right now to prove that this isn't some distant future state, it's a scaling reality.
So where do we start?
Let's look at the physical world first. The International Federation of Robotics reported that in 2024, there were 542,000 industrial robots installed globally.
Wait, 542,000 in just 1 year?
In 1 year, And that figure represents more than double the installation level from just 10 years prior.
Wow.
And this isn't like an isolated spike. They've hit over 500,000 annual installations for 4 straight years now.
So, I mean, the infrastructure for automated production is already deeply embedded,
Yeah.
and it's accelerating.
Right. And it's merging with massive cognitive automation, too. The document cites McKinsey's analysis of generative AI, which estimates the technology could add between $2.6 trillion to $4.4 trillion annually to the global economy.
Trillion. With a T.
With a T. And we're not just talking about chatbots writing, bad poetry here. This is the automation of complex logistical reasoning, design, analysis.
Right.
And when you combine that physical robotics with that cognitive layer, you start seeing massive investments in heavy infrastructure.
Give me an example of that.
Yeah, so for instance, there's a company called Terabase. They focus entirely on utility-scale solar construction. They announced $130 million in Series C funding.
$130 million just for solar construction.
Just for that. Their entire mandate is to accelerate software and automation to physically build solar fields faster and cheaper. So, serious structural capital is flowing into automating the heaviest, most labor-intensive parts of our physical world.
It's kind of like, it's like we've been playing this massive multiplayer video game where we have to constantly grind just to unlock basic survival resources.
That's a good analogy.
Like you have to chop the wood, you got to mine the stone, harvest the wheat manually day in and day out. But these stats show that someone is entering cheat codes into the system.
Yeah.
To basically automate the grind. Like the resource gathering has started just run in the background.
Right. The background processing is a really useful way to visualize it. And because that grind is being automated at a systemic level, the document moves into analyzing what actually happens when those essential resources are unlocked and decentralized.
Okay, so what does happen?
Well, it outlines this concept called lifestyle democratization. And it starts with the absolute basics of physical survival: food, energy, healthcare, and shelter.
Okay, so if the cheat codes are running the grind, what happens to the stuff we literally need to survive? Let's take food. Because the mechanism of how we get, say, a tomato right now is incredibly fragile, right?
Highly fragile, yeah. I mean, historically, food has been a centralized, gate-kept utility.
Right.
We rely on these massive centralized producers, long-haul fossil fuel logistics.
Trucking it across the country.
Exactly. And an enormous amount of seasonal physical labor. But the document points out that those mechanisms are shifting with the deployment of autonomous weeders, robotic harvesters, indoor vertical farms, and AI crop monitoring. The actual cost of producing a calorie collapses because you basically remove the seasonal labor bottleneck and those massive global shipping requirements.
Wow.
So communities can operate semi-automated food systems right where people live, which drastically reduces that supply chain fragility.
So you basically bypass the entire middleman. Like no more panicking when a single canal gets blocked halfway across the world, right?
Right.
Or, diesel shortage suddenly makes a head of lettuce cost $20.
Right, exactly. And we're seeing a nearly identical shift occurring in energy production, too.
How so?
Well, historically, energy required massive centralized infrastructure. Think coal plants, nuclear reactors, thousands of miles of wire.
Yeah, big power grids.
Right. And that physical reality meant a utility company could operate as a monopoly. They could charge you basically whatever they wanted.
Because you didn't have a choice.
Exactly. But when a community integrates solar panels, advanced batteries, microgrid automation, the power plant is their own roof.
Makes sense.
The energy becomes a local production layer. So the physical mechanism of a monopoly simply disappears because the community generates and stores its own power.
Okay, I can definitely see how solar panels and batteries democratize energy. But let's talk about healthcare, because that relies heavily on human expertise and institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
Just 3D print a doctor,
Right.
Or automated diagnosis without taking on massive risks.
Right, and the source text totally acknowledges that, which is why it frames healthcare automation not as replacing doctors, but as removing the administrative and monitoring friction.
The friction.
The stuff that makes care so expensive and inaccessible in the first place. So the document focuses on things like AI triage, continuous remote monitoring through wearables.
Swatches and stuff.
Right. Assistive robotics, automated medical documentation. Because right now, healthcare access is severely bottlenecked by how much clinician time is just wasted on paperwork.
Oh, the charting in the insurance forms.
Yeah.
It says endless.
Exactly. Routine data gathering.
Mhm.
So if automation handles the baseline monitoring, the data synthesis, the admin burden, it frees up the human clinician to actually focus on complex interventions. And empathy.
Right.
The text beautifully puts it this way. Machines can monitor. Humans still have to care.
Machines can monitor, humans still have to care.
Wow.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've decentralized food, we've localized power, we're removing the friction from health access. But the absolute heaviest physical essential is housing.
Yes.
Biggest one.
And the document talks about construction robotics, right?
Mhm.
3D printed building components, modular factories, and, well, here's where it gets really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I completely understand how a robotic arm can 3D print a concrete wall or, lay bricks infinitely faster than a human crew. But a robot cannot fight City Hall.
Right.
How does cheaper physical construction fix zoning laws or permitting nightmares or entrenched local politics?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the source material tackles that exact limitation. Because automation is a tool, right?
Yeah.
It's not a magic wand.
Yeah.
It cannot magically create new land, and it certainly can't rewrite a city's zoning laws for them. But what it does accomplish is drastically weakening the labor, material, and production bottlenecks.
The things that make basic shelter incredibly expensive before politics even enter the equation.
Exactly.
So by shrinking the cost of the physical structure itself, it shifts where the friction actually lives. Right. And taking that a step further, by removing the massive physical and financial friction of the construction process, you free humans up to focus their collective energy on exactly what you mentioned.
Not politics.
Zoning reform, community design, neighborhood planning. The human bandwidth previously spent just trying to finance the raw materials can now be spent reshaping the civic structure.
Wow, so you're not just exhausted from paying for the house.
Exactly. The document actually states the ultimate goal is to build dignity-focused housing models instead of, and I'm quoting the text directly here, spending decades worshiping mortgage dependency as adulthood.
Oof. Worshipping mortgage dependency as adulthood. That stings.
It's blunt.
But it hits the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
Because we just culturally accept like a 30-year debt sentence as the ultimate rite of passage.
Yeah, it's totally normalized.
And on top of housing, the document applies this same localized logic to physical goods, right? Through microfactories.
Yes. Through CNC automation, AI design tools, advanced 3D printing, because instead of every replacement part or tool or, piece of furniture depending on overseas labor and massive corporate shipping networks,
Like we do now.
right? Communities can produce the essentials locally. So production moves right next door to the point of demand. It shrinks the global supply chain down to a neighborhood block.
Okay, so if we take a step back and look at what the document is really arguing here.
Right.
Physical survival basically gets cheaper.
Right.
The machines take over the heavy lifting for our food, our shelter, our power, basic goods. But humans don't just want to survive, right? We want to build things. We want to create.
Absolutely.
So does automation democratize our minds and our capital the same way it democratizes our food?
Yeah, and this transition from physical survival to intellectual and creative freedom is where the document makes some of its most compelling arguments. It looks closely at the intangibles, and it starts with education. Historically, high-quality learning and credentialing have been trapped behind rigid, incredibly expensive institutional structures.
Student loans, massive tuitions.
Right. But with personalized AI tutors, adaptive learning algorithms, virtual project labs education basically loses its monopoly on knowledge access. Anyone can learn anything at their own pace.
Sure, but knowledge alone used to hit a massive wall if you didn't have capital. Like if you knew how to build a software platform or a new product, you still needed a huge team, massive investor funding, and a giant budget just to execute the idea.
And that capital bottleneck is actively breaking down right now. The text outlines how AI agents, no-code systems, automation platforms, they allow a solo builder, or maybe a tiny group of collaborators, to operate with the output of an entire traditional department.
That's incredible.
Right. You don't need $1 million in seed funding to hire 20 developers and marketers if an automated system can handle the coding, the deployment, and the logistics. The financial cost of executing a complex idea absolutely collapses.
So think about the old system of chasing expensive university credentials or spending years trying to secure investor capital. It's like paying a massive multi-million-dollar toll booth just to get onto the highway of life.
Yeah, exactly.
You spend the first half of your life just paying the toll. And automation is essentially building free on-ramps everywhere along the highway.
And those accessible on-ramps give you back the most critical, unrenewable resource in human existence: time.
Time.
The document highlights how home automation, AI scheduling, personal health assistance, they pull people off this exhausting survival logistics hamster wheel.
We spend so much of our waking lives just managing the admin of our own existence.
Right. Time has always been the hidden scarcity that the old economic system heavily monetized.
Which, I mean, that fundamentally alters our relationship with money itself, doesn't it?
By necessity, yes. If food, local energy, advanced education, housing components, business creation, if all of that is significantly easier and cheaper to produce, then money loses its overwhelming power as the ultimate permission slip.
It stops being a life or death thing.
Right. It might not disappear entirely, but it stops being the exclusive key required to access a dignified life. And what's fascinating here is that the document explicitly states the end goal of all this technological leverage.
Which is?
The goal is not humans doing nothing.
Right.
Right.
Because I think people hear this and picture a vision of humanity just like sinking into the couch with a VR headset for the rest of eternity.
Oh,
style.
Right, exactly. But the text emphasizes that the true goal is humans no longer being forced to prove their right to exist by performing machine work inside artificially scarce systems.
Wow. Which honestly brings us to the most existential and maybe the most intimidating part of this entire deep dive. If we aren't performing machine work, then who are we? Like, what is our value? If I'm no longer defining myself as a spreadsheet processor or a logistics manager or a coder, what am I?
Yeah, that question leads right into the human value shift section of the document. And the author points out that this isn't just, philosophical theorizing. The labor market is already signaling this exact shift.
How so?
Well, the text cites the PwC 2026 Global AI Jobs Barometer. And it highlights that as AI aggressively reshapes baseline productivity, the economic demand is skyrocketing for distinctly human-intensive skills.
So it's shifting away from what machines do well.
Right. We are moving away from a value stack based on repetitive volume and moving toward a value stack based on human depth.
And the document actually lays out 8 specific traits in this new human value stack, right? It's creativity, judgment, ethics, trust, taste, wisdom, courage, and connection.
Yeah, let's define a few. That's exactly how the text approaches them, because it's not just corporate jargon.
Right.
Like, judgment is defined as making complex decisions where messy context, nuanced trade-offs, and human consequences actually matter. Things an algorithm just can't weigh properly. Yeah. Taste is knowing what is deeply meaningful, aesthetically elegant, or culturally resonant to other humans.
Oh, I like that.
And wisdom is the ability to learn from pain and experience without blindly worshiping the suffering that created it.
Wow. That definition of wisdom is so powerful. But let me ask a vulnerable question on behalf of everyone listening right now.
Sure.
What does this all actually mean for me today? Because for centuries, we have aggressively tied our entire identity to our output.
Absolutely.
We measure our days by how many emails we managed to send, how many meetings we attended, how many widgets we produced. If I am no longer defined by my sheer productivity, how do I even measure a good day?
Yeah, that is arguably the hardest mental hurdle the document presents. Because the author argues that humanity must break the habit of confusing productivity with our humanity.
Oh.
Right? Machines produce, machines generate output. Humans have to take on the harder responsibility. We have to decide what is worth producing in the first place, why it matters, and who it ultimately serves.
So the metric of success completely changes.
Right. A good day is no longer measured by the volume of your output, but by the depth of your impact. Did you build genuine trust today? Did you apply ethical judgment to a really complex problem?
Yeah.
Did you connect disparate ideas in a highly creative way that no predictive template could ever generate? The true value is in being, well, unapologetically human.
I mean, it is incredibly liberating to think about life that way. It takes the pressure off acting like a perfectly optimized robot. But this all sounds almost too perfect.
Ah, yes.
And just as we were feeling highly optimistic, the document drops a massive warning label on all of this.
It sure does.
Because everything we've discussed so far, the decentralized food systems, the localized power grids, the collapse of the capital bottleneck,
Right.
this whole creative renaissance, it's all just a technical possibility.
Right.
It is not a guarantee.
No, not at all. The author dedicates a really critical section to what they call the ownership warning. And this raises an important question that could dictate the future of our species over the next century.
Okay, what's the warning?
The document warns that automation can only democratize life if access to these powerful tools is broadly distributed to the public. If a few massive corporations own all the robotic infrastructure, the foundational AI models, the compute power, the data centers, the energy grids,
Then what happens?
then artificial scarcity doesn't actually disappear.
It just puts on a new, highly sophisticated suit.
Exactly. It gets upgraded into automated gatekeeping. The text is brutally clear on this point. If the machines and the intelligence layers are concentrated entirely in the hands of a few institutions, we are simply rebuilding the exact same gatekeeping system.
Just with infinitely more efficient tools.
Exactly.
It's like someone invents a universal remote that can fix the whole world. Or no, it's like we're replacing toll roads with flying cars.
Oh, I like that.
Right. The new technology means we logically no longer need the toll roads. The physical friction is gone. But if the exact same company that owned the roads manages to secure the patent on the airspace, they're just going to charge us an invisible toll to fly. We haven't actually gained any freedom. The mechanism of extraction just became invisible.
The flying car analogy perfectly captures the danger. The real conflict of the 21st century is not going to be a cinematic war of humans versus machines.
Right. No Terminators.
Right. It is going to be a systemic battle of open access versus locked platforms. It is distributed, localized production versus highly centralized corporate ownership. As the text summarizes the entire dilemma, automation can unlock the doors. The question is whether society lets everyone walk through or lets new gatekeepers charge admission for the keys.
Let's new gatekeepers charge admission for the keys.
Yeah.
Man, that is the ultimate battle of our time.
It really is.
And, well, that brings us to the end of our journey today. We have thoroughly explored how automation holds the radical potential to end artificial scarcity. We've seen how the mechanisms of technology could decentralize our physical essentials, our food supply, our energy grids, our homes, and in the process, literally hand us back our time and our mental bandwidth.
The hidden scarcities.
Exactly. We've talked about how this shift forces us to abandon the exhausting idea of acting like productivity machines, challenging us to rediscover our humanity, our judgment, and our taste. But as we just said, all of this bright future hinges entirely on our collective willingness to fight for open access and prevent a new, invisible era of automated gatekeeping.
That's right.
So to you, listening right now,
Yeah.
as you go back to your daily life, maybe you were prepping for your next meeting or, diving into a complex new project. Remember this, your real assets in this rapidly changing world are your applied judgment, your empathy, your creativity, and your profound curiosity.
Absolutely.
It's not about memorized obedience anymore. The machines have that covered. It is entirely about your human depth.
And I want to leave you with a final, maybe somewhat unsettling thought to mull over as you step back into your day.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent this time talking about how much of our global society is explicitly built around the management of scarcity. So if our entire global social structure, our legal frameworks, our financial institutions, our daily 9-to-5 routines, if all of that was built primarily to manage human labor and control scarce resources, what happens to those massive institutions when the scarcity itself evaporates? Do they find a way to adapt and serve a world of abundance, or do they simply become obsolete?
Wow. That is a question that will absolutely keep me awake tonight.
Oh.
Because the treadmill is finally being unplugged. The real question is whether we are brave enough to step off it and walk through the open door.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will see you next time.